expect more out of myself. And I guess I didn't really realize this, and sometimes I don't really agree with it, but a very good friend is constantly telling me that. But it might be so.
One of the things, and I don't expect you to have a quick answer for this, but something that I often ask clients, we talk about how sometimes we continue patterns of thinking or behavior because there's some advantage to it. Now, I know you're coming here because you've reached a point where you're saying, oh, this guilt thing isn't working so well. To some degree, it's worked because it's motivated you, I'm sure, to really reach out to people, to do your best, be your best, and achieve some of the things that you have. But that's something I'm wondering if we could think about for a little bit. How has guilt seemingly, I'm not saying it's 100% been beneficial, but how has it been beneficial? Because usually we don't keep doing something if it doesn't feel like there's a benefit. So even though you're saying you're learning the benefits of grace that's not deserved, there's part of you that's still like, yeah, but there's some advantages to this, performance-based model or whatever.
I don't know that there's advantages to the guilt part, but the performance there is, because it's hard for me to sit still.
Yeah.
I like to be active. I like to, I love people. I love reaching out to people. I like learning the different socioeconomic statuses, the different cultures. People just thrill me. I like to see the diversity. So I think that is probably the benefit, because I'm able to be with people. And
so I'm wondering if maybe one of the goals of counseling, if I'm hearing everything you've said to this point, might be, how do I still maintain that heart of reaching out to people, loving people, caring, giving, and wanting to do my best as Christ through the Holy Spirit lives through me, but at the same time allowing myself to accept some of the grace as I'm doing that.
Yeah. And because I do love what I do. I do. It's the guilt and the things that I feel whenever I'm trying to sleep at night, and I tend to ruminate over my failures and over not reaching there, and what can I do to get to that next level, or to reach that next set of people. That's the part that I want to go away. Okay. I don't want the reaching out to go away.
Sure.
Just the guilt and the ruminating.
So it sounds like you notice the advantages to the caring heart you have, to what the Holy Spirit has done within you already. But, it's hard not to, again, look at it in this failure thing. As you said, with the little failures, you're like, it's still a failure. But,
right.
Yeah, so keeping that in balance. So one of the things that I'm wondering if maybe next time we can dive into, I can teach you a little bit about catching some of those thought patterns that with that rational Christian therapy approach. Because again, there's some good things, like you said, about being somewhat performance-based because it's kept you going. There's probably some things in your ministry and life that you've achieved because you've not just waited and sat idly by and trusted that the Lord's going to zap people and it's going to be done, but
wait's not. I hate that word. I hate the word wait. It's not in my vocabulary.
Sure. So next time we'll pick up with that. If you can just between now and next time maybe note some of the specific instances, because I like to really tailor counseling to the client, of anywhere where you would notice that enough message trying to come in your mind, trying to measure up the performance or this certain standard, or areas, again, like you said earlier, where you feel like you're negating the positive, even if it's 90-something% positive, where you're like, but oops, now it's totally a disaster because I didn't do it 100% perfect, or because the other person didn't totally accept the ministry of whatever, so.
Okay.
Well, it was really nice meeting you, and
Thank you.
I wish you well. Thank you so much for sharing, and I'll keep you in my prayers.
Okay, I appreciate
Thank you. Thanks. Hello, Sherry. Welcome back. How are you doing today?
Fine. How are you?
Good, good. Well, I wanted to see if you had a chance to think about some of those thought patterns or observe, and I thought, maybe we'd dive right into just some of the teaching about that rational Christian approach, if that's okay with you.
Sure, if you would.
Okay, so I'll be writing this down. I always give my clients a copy of the stuff we talk about, so you'll be able to take this home and kind of catch these things when they seem to be in place. So one of them, of course, would be that word enough. So anytime your mind goes to that thing of, if only I would have done A, B, and C, then it would have been enough. And we'll go through some examples in a little bit about that. But the enough is toxic because it's like, well, according to whose standard, How will I know? Well, what if 10 of the 30 people that I've reached out to, the homeless, really have had changed lives, have gotten jobs, have learned some life skills, and, another group of them said, oh, they went back to the streets. Does that mean I didn't do enough? According to whose standards? So we'll look at that. Anything we can also put in the form of shoulds. Now, again, we're not saying these are totally wrong. There's some truth and some lie in them. So it may be correct that, if I did such and such, I might feel more peace of mind. I might feel more relaxed because I've achieved more. So there may be some truth in if you believed I should do A, B, and C, but there may be some lie that keeps that pressure, the stress, the guilt, the lack of grace going. So the shoulds. Another one is if there's anything you can put in form of if only. If only, and this is whether about ourselves or about someone else. If only I would have reached 10 more people for the Lord this week. If only 5 more people would have come into the homeless ministry. Then I would really know that God approved of me.
Okay.
Then I would really feel successful. Or if only I didn't have 2 weeks in a row where people left my church. Then I would know that I was preaching the right message.
Excuse me.
Another one is have to.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for most of us, especially when we're action oriented, because I'm like that too, there's a lot we put in the form of have to. But what I like to do is, and we'll work on this over time, learning how to change the have to choose to.
Okay.
So that way we realize, okay, if I do go ahead and take action on something
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
that, I'm choosing to do that, but I'm also reminding myself there are options.
Right.
And one option is to have grace to say, okay, I can do this, but maybe a little later. Or I can do it, but maybe not to the extreme that I thought I was going to do it. Or I can delegate part of it to someone else, or,
Okay.
So there's several options. So have to is another one of those. So another one that is absolutes, sometimes we may think in terms of always and never. Things like, I'm always a wonderful Christian role model, really allowing the Holy Spirit to permeate my life. If I can just take on more, if I get less sleep, if I do more, if more people are won to Christ, if I have a positive attitude all the time and just keep adding more to the list of things to do. Or, man, I'll never reach 100% in every area. Or things like good or bad, right or wrong. And again, we're not saying there aren't Christian standards about good or bad, right or wrong. We're just saying sometimes when we go to either extreme, really black and white thinking, that performance mentality can just keep getting, reconfirmed in our life.
Right.
And so that could lead to more guilt. So as I'm sharing these, do any of these jump out at you in terms of things that you've noticed, any patterns or any examples of those in your own life?
Definitely the enoughs. If only and then.
Mm-hmm.
Probably all of them. But I would say probably those two are the biggest.
Okay. Can you think of a time in the last week, an example that maybe we could go through, and I can show you how we'll break down, the different thought patterns, and what we'll be doing overall with this rational Christian thinking is, first of all, identifying the lie or the distortion in the thought pattern, and then coming up with a new truth. So, looking at the whole picture. So, not just dwelling on the part that feels like the failure or the not measuring up.
Okay.
So is there an example you can think of where any of these might have applied in the last week or so since we met?
I'm trying to think. All right. In one of my congregations last week was a little bit low. And I remember at that time thinking, because sometimes I call the house ahead of time because I know depending on what staff is there, sometimes they don't know to come. But I did not have enough time to make those calls, and I thought if I had only called those homes, then my numbers would have been up.
Okay. So, so as you see, I'm making some columns here, and this is something I'll give to you again that you can take home so you can be practicing this. So we usually will write down something to remind us of the situation. So for example, you had lower numbers in that congregation. So if I hear you right, the thought was, if only I had called, maybe more people would have been there.
Right.
And it also sounds like there's an underlying assumption that, and because of me, they didn't get whatever they needed to spiritually. Right. So it's almost, not just the initial thought, but sometimes there's another one if you keep going with it that,
right.
Is more of that judgment. So if only I had called, it would be higher numbers, it would be more people ministered to. So pretty much it's my responsibility.
Right.
And again, what's tricky is there's a lie and there's a truth there. I'm sure that probably with the performance thing that you've done really well in life in the area of responsibility and taking on probably more than your share of things. Yeah. So, and then the next thing we look at is the feelings. Just because sometimes you may notice a pattern that if you continue to think in terms of if only I had done A, B, and C, you might, notice some patterns. So when you thought that, were you very effective with your congregation and thrilled and remembering the grace of God and that, His grace is sufficient, or what feelings were going on?
When? During the congregation or afterwards?
When that thought came to you about if I only had called.
That thought came on my way home. A little bit of guilt because I felt that I didn't do enough. Sadness. Actually, a little bit of motivation because then I knew that the next time I would make those calls.
So again, like I said, there's some positive in it because you're like, well, I'll figure out a new way to address this issue next time. But again, if I hear you right, there's this underlying, and if I would have done the right, quote unquote, things, or all the requirements, or followed through, as if it's all your responsibility to check on them, make sure they're there, and which again, there's some balance in that. I'm sure that's made you effective in your ministry, that you have followed through as much as you have to this point. But then it's easy to, in these moments where we're going through these thought patterns, to think, on the other hand, well, and because I fell short this time, it's awful. So one of the things I'd like to do is role model for you now. And again, it may take weeks or even a month sometimes for most people, a month to a month and a half, to really totally get used to the new thought patterns. Because again, when we've done them for a while, it becomes a habit. So one of the questions that I'll give you a copy of this as well, that I'll ask people. So when you think, if only I had called, if only I did the right things, if I only had more responsibility in that area, the first question I'll ask you, is it a fact or just an opinion? Is it a fact that if you made every single call, reached out to people, literally if you blocked out your day, didn't get any sleep, and did everything you could do, that definitely everyone would get the perfect ministry that week?
Well, no, because there's no such thing as perfect. But normally when I do call, whatever staff is there, they know to come.
Sure.
Yeah, because a lot of times it depends on who's there.
Another question is there any gain by looking at whose fault it is.